Now I'd like to introduce to you another very special guest. He was born and raised in Akron, Ohio, and he just certified 17 electoral votes for our next president, Donald J. Trump. Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose implemented a national model program in the state of Ohio for election integrity and security. The Honorable LaRose is Ohio's 51st Secretary of State, bringing to the office years of hard-earned leadership and public service developed as a U.S. Army reservist, a state senator, and a U.S. Army Special Forces Green Beret. His military service included deployments to Iraq, the Balkans, and the U.S.-Mexican border. Secretary LaRose lives in Central Ohio with his wife Lauren and their 3 girls. Secretary LaRose, welcome, and we are greatly appreciative to have you with us today.
Well, thank you, everybody. And hey, good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to join you all for this conversation. I've been looking forward to this. I'm actually joining you right now from Salt Lake City, Utah, where I'm speaking at a Secretary of State conference this afternoon and tomorrow. Wanted to start a little bit with a bit more about my background. As you heard, I've served in the military. I still serve as a reservist. I'm a member of a reserve unit out of Fort Belvoir, and get to do Army stuff part-time, which I enjoy. At 45 years old, I'm kind of the old Green Beret in my unit, but still enjoy being able to do that. I became a member of the state Senate in 2011. Had the chance to work on a lot of different things, but one of the things that I sort of specialized in was election integrity and election issues in general. Also had the chance to sponsor the bill that created the Ohio Cyber Reserve that I believe made us the first state in the country to do that. Many other states have followed suit. If you're not familiar with the subject matter, it may be worth looking into and encouraging your state to do it. What it does is it creates a reserve force, much like you would think of as the National Guard or maybe even like a volunteer fire department of cybersecurity experts that can be activated in a time of crisis to respond to issues pertaining to critical infrastructure in your state, matters pertaining to important economic sectors in the state, or state and local government for that matter as well. We were proud to help create that, and it's been in operation now for 7 years in Ohio. And thankfully, we haven't had to use it too much, but it's good to know that it's there when we need it. In my role as the Ohio Secretary of State, we really have 2 main missions. The first one is to help people vote. The second one is to help people start businesses. It really doesn't need to be much more complicated than that. I serve as Ohio's Chief Elections Officer, and in that role, I supervise our 88 county boards of elections. I set the statewide standards. The real work is done at the local level, however, and our county boards are largely autonomous in each of our 88 counties. The other part of the job, helping people start businesses, we're the front door for all new businesses. Anytime somebody wants to receive articles of incorporation to become a member of the entrepreneurial community to engage in Ohio's free market economy, they have to start with us by getting those articles of incorporation. I want to talk a little bit about the threat landscape. I think that you all are well aware of this, but as it relates to cybersecurity, it's interesting to start from the motivations. Of course, the predominant motivation for threat actors out there as it relates to cybersecurity instances is financial. That's why things like ransomware continue to be a massive issue. However, there are also some operators, nation-state operators, as well as non-state actors whose motivations are political or even terrorist related in nature. We're going to look at on the political motivation side. As it relates to the work that I do, it would seem that their motivation is to destabilize and to create distrust in Ohio's or America's electoral processes, to cause people to not trust the ways that elections run. Sometimes it's based on taking something that is a legitimate concern and amplifying it. Sometimes it's based on creating a concern, or other times it's based on just sort of making something up completely fictitious. We know who the state actors are, the bad guys, if you will. It's worth it to call them out. I think everybody is aware there's really four countries on the planet that are the most problematic, and really most bad things that happen on the planet stem from one of these four: Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. As it relates to cyber issues, the most predominant actors tend to be China, Russia, and Iran. Even to the extent that things appear to be a criminal enterprise, in some cases, they're done with the blessing of those countries. Of course, there are non-state actors as well, as we talked about, primarily financial motivations as it relates to them. Back to elections, in 2017, the U.S. federal government declared that election infrastructure is a sector for critical infrastructure, thereby putting it under CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Administration. And so in my role as Secretary of State, we work very closely with our federal partners there. And that's something that has been largely a productive relationship. It's also important to talk about the fact that in many cases, these are information operations that our foreign adversaries are engaging in. They're, I think, in many ways wise enough to recognize that they can't really hack elections. So what they've attempted to do is hack voters. What we would have called propaganda or psychological operations in the past is effectively what you see in many cases from foreign actors. And so, of course, it's our job to make sure that they're not successful. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the combating disinformation work that we've done. And of course, as we know, as part of the disinformation that can be out there, with the rise of AI, there are even greater capabilities to fake video and audio that's very realistic. It can be done very inexpensively. My team spent $0 and about 20 minutes of time to do a very realistic deep fake of me, for example. We of course used it as a learning lesson for our county boards of elections to understand how relatively simple that is. It was kind of a funny little video they put together that essentially was me declaring that dogs were going to be allowed to vote in 2024. Obviously ridiculous, but we use that as an example to show people how really easy to do this stuff is. I talked about the structure of elections in Ohio. It is highly decentralized. It's also as diverse as Ohio is. Meaning we've got counties with 1 million registered voters and a staff of 100, 130 people, a full-time information technology division, sometimes even full-time cybersecurity people. And then we've got county boards of elections with 10,000 registered voters and 2 full-time staffers. And it's 2, nice ladies that work in the courthouse basement and have been doing it for 30 plus years and don't have necessarily a high level of sophistication as it relates to elections. So I want to talk about what we did, and this is over the last 6 years that I've been in this office, so this is going to be very high level. But when I came in as Secretary of State in 2019, I recognized, and again, this is early 2019, I recognized the gravity of the situation, and I recognized that in many ways we were, I'm using air quotes, at war. Certainly not in the kinetic sense, but we were at war with foreign adversaries who wanted to undermine the trust in our elections. And so I thought it was important that we take that seriously. I also noticed pretty quickly that there had been a lot of studies done on cybersecurity. People had paid consulting firms, unknown, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to say what you should do. And we had binders on the shelf with all kinds of recommendations. I said to my team, we don't need to do another study. We don't need to, call some consulting firm. It's time that we go directly into the implementation phase. Even if that's only a 95% correct solution, it's time for some violent action as it relates to implementing some of these cybersecurity matters that need to be taken seriously. And so I decided early that it should be a sequential approach. You can only do so much so quickly, especially when you're talking about county boards of elections with the levels of diversity that I just explained to you. And so we decided that we would prioritize the most important and critical matters in what we called our security directive. I put together essentially a checklist of these are the 58 items that your county board of elections needs to complete. Of course, our office organically completed all 58 as well. And then we were able to leverage about $10 million in federal funding and grant that money out to the counties, sort of very quickly pushing it out to the counties in order for them to start checking items off of that list. I brought our county elections officials together for a briefing at our state Department of Public Safety, and wanted to kind of scare them straight by giving them the horror stories of things that could happen, and then roll out this checklist. Now, that was in February, March of 2019. They laughed out loud, literally chuckled and laughed. They thought there's no way they could accomplish this list of 58 items. I'm happy to say that within 6 months, they had all completed those. And then, of course, early in 2020, the whole world changed, and the scenario got even more complicated. And I can tell you that a lot of folks were glad that they had attended to that cybersecurity work that I had compelled them to attend to in 2019, because there was absolutely no time for that kind of thing in 2020. I'm going to go through a quick list of the things that were on that security checklist, because I think they're instructive. We have since done a 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, and 5.0 version of this. So essentially, we've made it an annual exercise to continue to ratchet up our work. So that first year was the low-hanging fruit, the really necessary stuff, and then we've ratcheted it up since then. One of the things that we did was build our disinformation and rapid response operation. I'm gonna put that to the end and talk about that a little bit later. I was, as part of the security directive, I was the first Secretary of State in the country to hire a CISO, a Chief Information Security Officer. Of course, we all know what a CIO is. CISO is a very different job. The CIO's job is to make sure everybody's systems work as expected when needed. The CISO is much more there to protect against bad guys. And so we hired an excellent one, and we still have a world-class CISO at our office. I also was the first Secretary of State in the country to ask people to hack me. And I would enjoy talking about this at conferences and get some looks of horror when I said, I'm the guy in charge of elections in Ohio, and I've asked people to hack me. But essentially what we did was engage with the white hat hackers, the ethical hackers, or the so-called security researchers. We said, hey, listen, bad news rather doesn't get better with time. If there's a hole in my fence, I want to know about it. And so we created our vulnerability disclosure agreement, which is still at the bottom of our website. And it says, if you hack me, if you don't do any damage, don't publicly deface the website, don't do any kind of damage to the thing. If you report it to us, we're not going to prosecute you. In fact, we'll give you recognition if you want it. And since then, we've had an annual award that we do at our summer conference where we recognize the hacker that was able to find the most critical vulnerability. And for a lot of these guys, that's a real career credential for them to be recognized by the Ohio Secretary of State's office for their hacking work. And so that's something that we're really proud of. We also were really intentional about what I call the human firewall. You see, all the technology in the world isn't worth a damn if everybody clicks on every cat video they're sent or opens links they're not supposed to open, or for that matter, if you have an insider threat from somebody who wasn't properly vetted. And so we've been real intentional about the human firewall. We've required background checks at every one of our county boards of elections. I'm happy to say that 99% of those went through without a hitch. There were 4 or 5 people that, instead of submitting to a background check, decided to resign from their jobs. That to me is a sign that maybe we were about to find something. But either way, every election official in Ohio is now subject to a background check, as well as ongoing training. And I lead by example on this because I think we all work for companies that require some level of cybersecurity training. I'm usually the first one every year to complete the training, and then I hold people accountable not only within my office, but at each of our county boards of elections to do that training as well. Of course, things like multi-factor authentication. If there's one thing you take away from this, if you're not using multi-factor authentication on every platform, do it before you go to bed tonight. And then, of course, a series of phishing and smishing tests that we do. And I'm proud to say that we've continued to do that. And we've had to do some remedial training with people that have, unfortunately had a bad habit of opening attachments and clicking on links that they shouldn't. We also raised our capabilities at our boards of elections as it relates to detecting and deterring distributed denial of service attacks. Those that has proven useful because we've fought off several pretty sophisticated DDoS attacks in the last few years. We required penetration testing, which is done by our federal partners at each of our county boards of election. Of course, that's an ongoing thing. We had each of our boards of elections transition to a .gov domain. When I got in here, a lot of their websites were .com and .org and all kinds of different things that had been set up 15 years ago. We wanted everybody on the .gov domain for security purposes, but also for the public information side. We now tell people that if you want trustworthy information, go to that .gov site and make sure that you're on an official trustworthy .gov domain. We also added to every one of the tops of those websites a banner that says this is an official government website, and if you click on it, it'll tell you more about that. We've required each board of elections to install an Albert intrusion monitoring system. This is a system that is used to essentially like the burglar alarm for your cyber environment. One of the reasons why this is so important is government operates on a really predictable schedule, and the bad guys know that. In the old days, if you hacked into a government system, around 5 or 6 at night on a Friday, it may be days before anybody knew something was wrong until people came back to the office on Monday. And in the meantime, you'd have your complete run of the place. Well, now with these Albert intrusion detectors, we know if there's malicious code. We know if there's malicious activity occurring. We can send a sheriff's deputy down to the county board of elections and start unplugging stuff at 2 a.m. on Saturday morning to try to isolate the incident and keep it from spreading. Those intrusion detectors are vital and important. We also have seam loggers, which allow us to look back historically at what's happening. We've fielded a team of cyber liaisons throughout the state. Again, recognizing the levels of sophistication, we have regional cyber liaisons. Essentially, this is your help desk for cyber issues, and they are physically at our boards of elections on a monthly basis, more often if needed. They make their rounds, and the boards of elections have that first contact to call. Again, I've found some counties don't have a CIO. It's a small rural county, and they'll have the county engineer, because he knows something about computers, trying to be a CIO, and they're doing the best they can. But we think that these cyber liaisons have been important. AI endpoint detection, rapid response team that can load up and go physically to the spot where it's needed. Network segmentation, malicious domain blocking, which has been interesting because we've blocked whole countries and then found, oops, we've got State Department people there that need to request an absentee ballot or what have you. And so in some cases, we've had to back off some of those ever so slightly. But again, I'd rather err on the side of caution there when it comes to blocking malicious domains and problematic countries. Vendor standards. I think you all know how reliant everybody is on vendors. And if your vendor stinks, you stink. We have put some really stringent vendor standards in place. I think the classic story is the Target hack. The major retailer, Target Corporation, was almost taken down by a ransomware attack a decade ago. It was the air conditioner repairman that introduced that into their system. And so vendors are vitally important. And we even write it into the contracts now that vendors have to meet certain cybersecurity standards. For that matter, we require only domestic-based vendors. We will not work, not sorry. We will not work with foreign-based companies as it relates to something as crucial as our elections infrastructure. Sometimes that brings up issues, but we've been able to work through those. Physical security. Again, if you do all this work and your server closet's left unlocked so that anybody that wants to can walk in there, you haven't accomplished much. And so we've been very serious about our physical security as it relates to this. Systematic patching, so that there's no 0-day vulnerabilities anymore. It's more like 0-hour vulnerability. Once a vulnerability is known and it's out in the wild, it is being exploited. And so quickly patching and updating systems with those security patches is vital, and we're lightning fast when it comes to that, and it's something that we're proud of. And then I'm going to end with this as far as the list of things: redundancy. Redundant systems. Anybody that flies an airplane or anybody that served in the military understands how important redundancy is. And so we have built in redundant systems so that if you lose something, you have a backup, to include communication system. We have, for example, we're all very reliant on cell phones, email, and text messages. And so I have now fielded our state emergency radio systems, and they're a couple $100 a piece. But each county board of elections now has a state emergency radio, so that in worst case scenario, sort of a mushroom cloud, if you look out the window kind of a scenario, we can at least communicate with all of our county boards of elections. Here are the results. We have fended off a number of pretty significant attacks. In 2019, a significant DDoS attack that we defeated that had some foreign attribution to it. We were awarded a Difference Maker Award by an organization called SANS, S-A-N-S, just a couple of years ago for the work that we're doing. And one of the reasons why I'm in Salt Lake City right now is to speak with other secretaries. We've become recognized as the example to follow, and other states are now looking to emulate Ohio's example. This is what the U.S. Department of Homeland Security has said. Both the previous Trump administration and the Biden administration said follow Ohio's model when talking to other secretaries of state. So we're proud of that. One other thing, and this has happened just recently in a county in Ohio. It happened in a county last year where, and this, I hate to sort of celebrate somebody else's failure, but it is a fact that these two things have happened. We've had some pretty major ransomware attacks hit county government, where it moved through the system so that every office in county government was taken down. The county engineer's office, the county treasurer's office, county sheriff, EMA, county courts, all through. And the last man standing, the only office unaffected, was the county board of elections, because of the network segmentation, because of all the security that I just listed that we put in place. That's validation that we're doing it right as it relates to elections infrastructure, and so that other states, other entities in government should follow that example. I told you I'd talk about combating disinformation in the 2 minutes that I've got left. I think that it's important that we as government actors not try to be arbiters of truth, but instead focus on empowering the voters with accurate information by pushing accurate information out there about how to be a voter, how to register to vote, how to what a provisional ballot is, and that kind of thing. There are, however, examples that rise to the level where we need to debunk something that comes up, and we've set up a rapid response effort that does that. I'll give you just one example. I could list 5 or 6. In the 2022 election, there was somebody sharing a video on, I think, Instagram or one of the social media platforms, and it was a video of a burning box truck. And this individual claimed that they were a Cincinnati, Hamilton County election official. And look, here's my box truck full of ballots. It's on fire. I wonder if your ballot is one of them, question mark, kind of thing. Now, naturally, this starts going viral and people start spreading this around. Well, we were curious too. So we did a reverse image search on that video, and we found it had nothing to do with elections. It was not even in Ohio. It was a run-of-the-mill traffic accident in Texas that somebody got video of years ago. And so we were able to watermark that with debunked or false, and then put it back out, send it out to our partners in the media, and make sure that people know that this is somebody's bad idea of a joke, or maybe a malicious effort. But either way, it's not true. That's the kind of stuff that we focus on as it relates to combating false information. So I've used my allotted 30 minutes. I would be happy to take questions if you guys have any. And again, thank you so much for your time and attention.
Secretary LaRose, absolutely outstanding. In fact, I think, and I would hope, a group like the National Governors Association would maybe add the chapter of Ohio into their playbook, into their cyber program. Speaking of the NGA, we do have one individual here who I believe is still, correct me if I'm wrong, Gautam Gandhi. He is the technology cyber advisor for Governor Glenn Youngkin in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Gautam, I know that you had a question. Please go ahead.
Honorable Secretary Frank, it is a pleasure meeting you. My name is Gautam Gandhi, and I'm speechless. What you just shared, I think you are definitely a role model, and you lead by example. Having managed Federal Reserve Bank, I was CIO, and CISO was reporting to me, and I know the challenge and what we went through, and the quasi-public sector side on Federal Reserve Bank. Kudos and appreciate what you shared, and I hope you are sharing this with other secretaries, including Virginia State Secretary as well, by the way, what we have implemented. Again, I have many questions, but one question I would like to ask, Are there any state-supported incubator accelerator program that are or including innovation hubs for cybersecurity startups in state of Ohio?
I just shared my email address on there as well. If you have any interest in connecting with me, so the economic development side of this is something that would be managed by our what we call Jobs Ohio in our state. I don't know if there are any incubators specifically focused on this. What we do have and what we have funded, and it's part of the cyber reserve legislation that I did, is a series of cyber ranges throughout the state. In many cases, those are in conjunction with our universities. I think one of the largest is at the University of Cincinnati, where people can practice their skills and even bring in the architecture of their own environment and sort of test for vulnerabilities there in an environment where nothing will be harmed in the process. And so those cyber ranges have been really valuable as a way to help not only increase the skill level of our workforce in Ohio, but also for testing and validating our cybersecurity infrastructure and our architecture.
No, thank you. And again, just another question, if I may ask, Secretary. You mentioned so much about like agency and interagency within the state and how you implemented cybersecurity program, cyber risk management, the governance and monitoring. Again, my experience here has been still the agencies are working in silos. So do you have a framework at the state level that shows intra-agency communication collaboration, as well as public-private collaboration on protecting critical infrastructure for the state of Ohio? And is that a framework available that can be shared with other states?
Yeah, so we are part of the ISAC, the Election Infrastructure ISAC. If you're familiar with ISACs, they're set up through the federal partners, and those are the information sharing and analysis centers. We use that as a great platform for exchanging best ideas and best practices at the state and local level. It's candidly harder sometimes. It also relies on personal relationships. We have built personal relationships with our county partners. Of course, the county boards of elections have to do what I say because I have directive authority over them. But as it relates to working with county commissioners and that kind of thing, it's all just relationship based. One other thing that we've done in our office, and that is we have offered the Department of Homeland Security to co-locate somebody with us on election day. That's been useful. They need a place to work out of, their field team. And so if they're going to be somewhere, instead of working out of a hotel room like I'm doing right now, we can give them good high-speed internet and a pot of coffee and let them work out of our office. And that way they're within reach physically if we need to grab them. Of course, they're serving a whole region of the country, but we like to have them co-located with us on election day in case the worst-case scenario comes up.
Thank you, Secretary. Appreciate it. Honor to meet you.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. So again, Secretary LaRose, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time and your comments, your leadership. It's obvious that you're in the military, and we absolutely thank you for your service. I'm 20 years retired myself. We're all getting old, which speaks for the workforce and the new generation. So I would like just some quick thoughts on the future of the workforce, especially related to military programs. The Biden administration, they put out a workforce education guidance document. What are your thoughts on the future for skill sets, training, and looking at more option of choice through the schooling system and even through technical community college type environments?
Well, certainly the market is there, right? So this isn't a supply and demand problem because there are a lot of opportunities and they are very well paying. In fact, if any of you have a child going through college and if they want to be sort of guaranteed full employment at somewhere north of six figures for basically the rest of their life. Cybersecurity is probably the thing that they should look at studying. I think, though, that we have a role in the public sector to make sure that we're exposing children to it at a young age. I'm happy to. I have the privilege of living in a really good school district, and my kids are blessed with that. But we have a 11-year-old coming home and talking about the coding classes that they're doing and the hackathon that they're having and that kind of thing. I recognize that doesn't exist in every school district, but we should start moving in that direction where possible. And that means expending resources to do so. The Cyber Reserve is also, in and of itself, sort of a workforce development opportunity, because somebody who's maybe a junior level cybersecurity professional can come to the Cyber Reserve in exchange. And again, they keep their full-time job. This is just when needed, they get called. And they have the same career protections that a National Guard member would have, so they can't lose their job if they're activated for a couple of weeks. But they get access to some additional training, possibly security clearances and that kind of thing that are necessary for them to get the higher level briefings that they need to get. And so the Cyber Reserve is a great one also. And then, I actually heard of an interesting model yesterday. There was a gentleman from Israel that came to visit me, and I've developed a lot of great relationships. In fact, I had the chance to spend a week in Israel shadowing their elections director as a learning experience for me to understand sort of how do they do it. And obviously, they're a country surrounded by people that want them dead and have a lot of cyber threats as well. So my week in Israel was very informative. But this gentleman that came they've got a program specifically taking people that are separating from the military in Israel and giving them training to become cybersecurity professionals. And again, I'm not talking about the people in their cyber units. They have specialized units in Israel that are among the best in the world. Those people already have the training. I'm talking about people like me that were trigger squeezers and door kickers and truck drivers and tank drivers and that kind of thing. Taking those folks, because those aren't exactly the most marketable skills in the private sector, taking those folks and then helping to train them in cybersecurity. And he said it's been a very successful program. I would say that the kind of dedicated, smart, patriotic people that are getting out of the military are an ideal set of candidates for cybersecurity training. And it could almost be like an updated version of the GI Bill to help these individuals get cybersecurity training for their second careers.
That's wonderful. Well, again, Secretary LaRose, thank you. Hope all is well in Ohio, and especially your staff, Alex. I really appreciated working with him to get you here with us this afternoon at our first Gold Institute Summit. If you wouldn't mind, for all the other participants, and you're welcome to stay on for the rest of the summit as well.
Yeah.
We're going to shoot.
I shared my email address, which is frank@ohiosos.gov. And then on all the different social media platforms, I'm just at Frank LaRose. And I look forward to staying in touch.